jump right in. I have got a great topic for you today. If you are somebody that struggles with using the word no, you are going to want to listen in. You are going to want to get your cup of coffee. You're going to surround yourself with whatever hot beverage you like, or cold beverage if that's your jam, and buckle in, because I'm going to give you a ton of great information, and I'm going to do it in my style, of course. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Denise Murray, licensed therapist for empathetic women and intuitive empowerment coach. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about saying no. This was a topic that the community members here actually asked for. You wanted some more information on it. So I know that there's a lot of people struggling with it. I know for myself, I struggled with saying no for a really long time. So let me just validate and say, you're not alone in this. This is not easy. And I'm going to delve into why throughout the course of this presentation today, and diving into this topic, because I think it's important for you to have that information and that wisdom at hand, so you know what's kind of driving some of these things and some of these reasons why it's so uncomfortable to say no. And if I just like set the stage with this a little bit, and you think about, like, if you have a difficult conversation, you have to say no to somebody, like, what is happening in the body? I really want you to think about and reflect on this for a minute. If you had to say no to me right now about anything, it doesn't matter what it is, whatever the case may be. Like, if I asked you to help me move today and you were like, oh, I have to say no, like, what happens in your body? Where do you feel that most? Does your chest feel like it's clenching? Does your stomach feel like it's aching? Do you feel like you've just got this kind of weight on your shoulders? I want you to pay attention to how your thought of saying no is reflected in the body, and really, really making that connection, because part of what makes it so difficult is these kind of physiological symptoms that come along with it. It's not just saying the word, because if we could just say the word, that would be easy. It's all these kind of things that are going on inside internally that makes it all that much more difficult. It's the physiological state that happens within the body. So that's really playing into this as well. But with that said, let's jump in, let's dive in. Of course, if you have any questions for me, leave a comment below and I will absolutely answer those for you as soon as I possibly can. But let's get right into it. So let's talk, first things first. Why do we feel like it is so difficult to say no, especially as women? I don't know. And I'm sure men struggle with this as well too. I'm not a man. I don't identify as a man, but like, I feel like this is something that often happens to women, and those who identify as women. It seems more often, but again, I don't have any statistics for that or any scientific proof, but it's just, that seems to be like my own personal experience. So, and you can let me know as well too if you feel this way as well too. But I think one of the main things is there's this like impending fear of disappointing others. If I say no, I'm going to hurt someone else. And if I hurt someone else, I'm going to feel guilty. And I know I want to do a topic all about guilt as well too in the near future, because I think I've learned a lot about guilt in the last little while, and I've learned about how it works and how it plays out. And I think that oftentimes we tend to associate guilt with things that aren't really guilt at all. But that's a story for another day. But either way, I think there's this fear of disappointing others and really feeling guilty about it and being like, man, like, I should have just said yes to them. I should have just said yes, and then I wouldn't feel this way, and then they wouldn't feel bad, and now they're upset with me. And there's all these things that go on in the mind. And even if that person, for example, even if you say no to someone and they're not actually upset with you, there's this narrative in this story that our brain goes to almost consistently. It's a human nature thing where it's like, oh my God, they're mad at me. Oh my God, like, what are they thinking of me? Oh my God, are they gonna ever talk to me again? Have I lost my friend? And this seems to be like a spiral where it's like one thought and our brain just takes us on a wild ride, and it sends us down the spiral, and it creates a story around why saying no is a bad thing. And it continues to perpetuate that story, and it continues to solidify that story, so that every time we say no, our brain goes back to that pattern of, remember that time you felt so guilty for saying no to your best friend Shelly because she needed help moving and you didn't have the bandwidth for it, like it, and it just becomes a never-ending cycle. But at the root of it, it's this fear of disappointing people or disappointing other people, and that can be a really tough thing to navigate. But like anything in personal development work, knowing that and having an awareness around it and building an awareness around that fact, like what's at the root of this discomfort of saying no, this is going to help you tremendously. But that's like kind of number one reason is like, I don't want to disappoint anyone ever. That's just not what I'm going for. Another aspect, and to be honest with you, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but societal expectations. There is a pressure that we feel as human beings. Now, I'm just going to lump all of us into like one word, folks. All of us folks feel that this pressure to say yes, that we have to be yes people, that we always have to say yes, that if we don't say yes, there's something wrong with us. And we need to be always catering to other people. And if we're not catering to other people, that's not okay. This is kind of the world we live in. And that societal pressure is extremely strong. I'm not going to talk about it too much here because we're going to get into it later. And when I say societal pressure and societal expectations, you know what's coming next. And we're going to dive into that in just a minute. But another factor that's driving this is just a desire to be liked. We're human beings. We want to be liked. We want to be cared for. We want to be accepted. We want to belong. This is part, again, of human nature. We are social beings. We want to be surrounded by people. We want to have connections. And there's this feeling like, well, if I say no, and if I don't do anything anyone asks of me, what if they don't like me anymore? What if they leave? And this can lead into a lot of times your attachment style, which I've talked about in other topics. Meaning if you have, an anxious attachment style, you might feel this impending sense of like rejection, like they're going to leave, like they're going to abandon me. Like if I don't do this, they're not going to be around anymore. And I feel like I need to hang on to them for dear life because I don't want to lose anybody that's around me. I just can't handle that. My body can't handle that. So in that desire to be liked, as to avoid feeling this anxiety, we then overstretch ourselves and we say yes to things when really and truly we don't feel like that we want to say yes to, or we're up for it, or we're not into it. We don't have the bandwidth for it. And you don't really have to make an excuse when it comes to saying no. And again, we'll get into that later. But at the end of it all, at the end of the day, it's like, I want this person to like me, even if that means I put myself on the back burner, but there is something that I want you to know. There is something that you need to know, is that saying no is not going to make you a villain at all whatsoever. In actual fact, it makes you the hero in your own story. And if you're feeling like you're a villain for saying no, it's important to look at some of that conditioning and some of those stories that are in your head around the word no. And this can go right back to childhood. If you think about it, this is a perfect example. How many times, if you said no to your parents, you would get in trouble. And obviously I grew up in a different time. A lot of us grew up in a different time. I think there's more awareness around this now, and allowing children to be part of the discussion, to have some autonomy, to be part of the conversation. But anytime we said no, even to things like, no, I don't want to eat my mashed potatoes. And your parents say to you, no, you must eat your mashed potatoes. I know it's best for you. In that moment, probably without even realizing it, they've shut down your ability to say no, and they've made you feel some sort of shame or guilt around it. Like, oh, I better listen to my parents. Even though I don't want to do this, and I feel like I don't want to do this, and my body doesn't want to do this, I better just do it because they want me to do it. And saying no then becomes this thing that we're not allowed to do. And it starts very, very young, from childhood. Fun story. When I was a kid, I hated mashed potatoes. That's why I use this particular example. I only ever really liked the instant ones, which is kind of funny. But and even still to this day, I've got a weird thing with mashed potatoes. I can take it or leave it, but that's not the point of the story. But I wouldn't be able to leave the table if I didn't finish my mashed potatoes. I wasn't allowed to not eat them. I wasn't allowed to not say no. So I would stuff my cheeks with them like a little chipmunk, and then I would go to the washroom and spit them all out. I'm sure my parents knew about it, but either way. But that's where this is being built, and that's the point of the story, is to understand where this starts. Even in school, you're not allowed to say no to things. Think about how many times in your life you haven't been allowed to say no to things. And this continues to be a repeated pattern through life. And you may have found yourself in potentially relationships with other people, whether they're, intimate relationships, personal relationships, friendships, where if you said no to them, there were consequences, and they weren't desirable consequences. Maybe they got mad at you, they yelled at you, they belittled you. No matter what the case is, the brain relies on patterns. That is what the brain does. It relies on patterns to source information from. So if you've grown up never being able to say no, or having discomfort around saying the word no, or through relationships and friendships, and no has always been a problem for you, your brain's always going to go to that whenever it comes time for you to embrace no. But there is nothing more important than embracing and reclaiming your right to the word no. It is a complete sentence. But those are just a few of the reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons, and I think I touched a little bit about this in the beginning, is that there's this, we just don't like feeling uncomfortable as people. Sitting with the uncomfortable feelings, sitting with the physical manifestation in the body at the thought of even saying no, sitting with that sometimes feels even more difficult or challenging than just saying yes. you're like, man, I don't want to sit with these uncomfortable feelings. I don't want to sit with this feeling in my body. I may as well just say yes, and then I won't have to feel this. But realistically, in the long run, when you are burnt out, when you're feeling bitter, when you're feeling passive aggressive, when you're feeling upset and angry with the world because you've said yes to so many things that weren't really things that you wanted to do, you're going to have a physical manifestation anyway, one way or another. Whether you say no or you say yes, either way, there's going to be something there for you to work through and to navigate and to ground through. So why not try saying no on for size and dealing with the discomfort up front rather than having to deal with it at a later time? But I think it's important to discuss, and I talked a little bit about societal pressure earlier. Yes, that's right. We are talking supposed to culture, where really supposed to culture tells us that we need to be saying yes all the time, that saying no is like breaking some sacred oath, like turning down plans with people. That's like a big no-no, or declining extra work, another big no-no. This is that pressure from supposed to culture that we need to be consistently saying yes to things, whether we like it or not. And I think that has a lot to do with our culture and the way that society wants us to be or thinks we should be. And it wants us to be all yes people. And if you can think about the advantage of living in a society or society being a bunch of yes people, then it leaves you open to more conditioning, because you're just going to do whatever you're told, basically. It's making us feel like we need to be conformists all the time in order to be accepted, in order to be liked, in order to be a functioning member of society, right? And if you're new around here and you don't know what supposed to culture is, it is the rule book, the invisible rule book that dictates what we should do, how we should behave, and when, in this specific instance, when we should say yes, when we should say no. It's like a script that's always running, but it's not necessarily your script. It's not necessarily attuned to your intuition, to who you are, to you at the center, right? So that's the problem with this, is that we're handed this ideology and we're expected to follow it, but then when we follow it and it doesn't necessarily align with who we are, we're left feeling like there's something wrong with us. So we really have to be mindful of the pressure that supposed to culture is putting on us, that likes to maintain the status quo, that doesn't want to shake anything up, that doesn't want you to say no to anything, that always say yes, continue to be the yes person. And I think sometimes I always think about this, like, who wrote these rules? And when you're having difficulty or you're feeling the pressure to continuously say yes, ask yourself, who wrote this rule? Who in my life? And remember, supposed to culture embodies everything. It involves societal expectations, pressure from your parents, pressure from school, pressure from your community, those around you, magazines, media. It encompasses all of those things. So ask yourself those questions. Who made this rule that says I can't say no? Whose voice am I hearing in my head? If I really take a moment and reflect on that and close my eyes and feel into my body and feel into what's being said in my brain, who is it? Who's the voice that's saying you shouldn't say no, you should say yes? And really pinpoint that, because all of this work is built around awareness, you know? And I think part of this as well too, and part of these fears, and this goes back to some of the reasons why we struggle with this, is that saying no, like, the fear of the consequences. But here's the thing. When you say no to somebody, this is like setting a very strong boundary. And the people that in your life that have been used to you being a yes person, they have been gaining so much from you being a yes person. They have been gaining all the benefits of you being a yes person. So when you start to say no and you start to tell them, I don't have the bandwidth for that, I don't have the space for that, I am not available for that, you are going to have people that are angry with you, because they were the people that were benefiting from it. But what we have to understand, especially when setting boundaries, in which no is a boundary, is that people have to earn the right to be in your life. Like I always say to everybody here in the community, my own clients, people have to earn the right to sit at your table. And if they are not going to be respectful of your no, there's a bug in my face, if they're not going to be respectful of your boundaries, then it's time to take stock and take inventory as to whether or not you want that person in your life at all, if they're worth it. But I mean, I think the big thing is understanding that supposed to culture plays a big role in why we feel such discomfort in saying the word no, and why it's so important, which is a segue into the next topic, hurrah, which is why reclaiming the word no is so important. And I think reclaiming it is all about taking ownership for your decisions and asserting your boundaries. Like I just said, no isn't a rejection. It's a declaration of self-worth, of autonomy, of knowing what's best for you and being confident in knowing what's best for you. You are the expert in your own life. I'm always saying this. You know what is best for you. You know what you can and cannot handle. So if there are things coming up for you that you know you cannot handle, it is up to you then to strengthen and confidently say, I'm so sorry, I'm just not available for that. And that comes with a little bit of practice, and it's all in the delivery. It's all in the delivery. And keep in mind too, as you begin to say no, we start to break that people pleasing mold, that need to always be taking care of others ahead of taking care of ourselves, making sure that everyone else is happy and leaving ourselves on the back burner. And as you reclaim your own no, you then start to break the mold of people pleasing a little bit at a time. Taking on people pleasing is a big job just in general, but this is like one step you can take in that direction, right? And I want you to start to think of saying no as your personal like magic wand. When you say no, you are conjuring up a sense of self-respect and authenticity. You're being true to yourself. And it's not about denying other people something. It is about affirming yourself. That's how I want you to look at this. That's how I want you to reframe the word no. It's not about denying others. It's about affirming yourself. Let that sink in for a minute, because that is a big one. And I mean, if you think about it, being able to say no doesn't just benefit you, it creates a ripple effect. When you stand firm in your boundaries, you start to inspire other people in your circle and around you to do the same, especially if you are a parent to young children or young kids. Like the fact that they can see you confidently saying no, and they can see you, how you do it, and you can be that inspiration for them, it empowers them to do it, so they're not stuck in the same loop of fearing the word no as they grow up, right? And I think too is just a big aspect of this is understanding and overcoming the guilt that comes along with it. It's time to kick that to the curb. Your needs are just as valid as anyone else's. Saying no isn't selfish. It's self-love in action. And I always say sometimes too, it's time to embrace your selfish duality. So even though it's not selfish in a malicious way, it's selfish. There's an aspect of selfishness where it's taking care of you. And sometimes I like to bring a little bit of softness to the word selfish, because it's okay sometimes to make things about you. And it's okay to embrace the word no. So with all of that said, let's talk about a couple of ways, a couple of strategies that you can use to support you in saying no. So we're going to start really small. I mean, one of the strategies right away is noticing what happens in the body when you say no, and starting to have an awareness around that, and starting to ground yourself when it comes time to say no. Like if you're feeling a massive body reaction when you know you have to say no, when you know it's up and coming, taking a moment to ground yourself, taking a moment of time to just put hands to heart and do some deep breathing, put your feet on the ground, really feel rooted, and give your nervous system a sense of calm that it needs. That's the first thing, first and foremost. And the second thing you can do, and this might sound a little silly, is do a little mirror pep talk. Like if you know you got to say no to somebody, practice it in the mirror, practice saying it to yourself, because you are someone that's not, you're not a judgmental person of yourself. I mean, maybe you are, but that's a topic for another day. But it's easy to say no to yourself, right? So practice saying it in the mirror, practice that conversation, practice the things that you're going to say, so that when it comes time to actually do it, you have a little bit of confidence around it because you've practiced it. This is like saying no is like building muscle. You have to practice. You have to keep at it. There's got to be some consistency there. And you can start there. Another little thing you can do is actually start like a no journal. And the no journal is your personal space to document your journey towards exploring and saying no. It's like a map where saying no is like a little bit of a treasure, and you're fearless in it. So think of it as a bit of a diary, but like with a little bit of sass. We're not just jotting down thoughts. We're scripting our own hero triumphs when saying no. So how are we going to do this? Do a little daily reflection. Every day, take a few minutes to reflect on a situation where you said no or wished you said no. Jot down your thoughts and feelings about the outcome. Highlight successes. Write down, hey, I had a really, this was amazing. I said no to this person. They didn't yell at me. They were respectful of me. They were kind, they were kind to me. They were totally great about it. Write that down so that you have evidence to go back to the next time you have to say no. But write it down. Celebrate your wins. And if something didn't go the way you wanted it to, if you said no and you got a bad reaction, write about that as well. And really allow your thoughts to be, why do I feel like that went that way? Was it really about me, or was it that other person? What held you back? If you didn't say no, was it guilt? Was it fear? Was it the need for approval? Half the battle sometimes is knowing what's standing in your way so that you can work through them, right? So really dig deeper and understand, like, why didn't this go the way I wanted it to, right? And then on top of this, you can create a few little goals for yourself. Maybe it's about, if you're just getting, like, if you've been saying yes your whole life, maybe think of one thing you can say no to, one sort of silly thing that you can, maybe you have this one neighbor that always asks if you want home baked cookies, and you always say yes because you feel bad, and they're going to come, because they're going to come on Tuesday, because Mary always comes on Tuesday with brownies and cookies and all this stuff. Maybe that's your one place to say no. And practice saying no with softness. Thank you so much. I love that you're thinking of me, but this time I have to decline. But thank you so much. And leave it at that. But start small. Always start small. And another fun thing that you can do, especially if you know you have to say no to something coming up, like put on your best playlist, put on some great music, put on some empowering music, get yourself ready, talk to yourself in the mirror, do some hero poses, get yourself prepared and in the mindset to say no. Now, this isn't always going to be possible because sometimes you have to say no on the fly. But again, this is going to build your confidence little by little by little, and I think a banging nope playlist filled with songs that make you feel ready to say no, that make you feel empowered, that's going to be really helpful too. It's something you can kind of listen to and really feel excited about. And finally, just start practicing some polite declines. Master the art of saying no without the guilt. Saying things like, I'd love to, but I can't, or I'm so sorry, I'm fully booked. I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Maybe next time. Can I take a rain check? I'm so sorry I can't help you move. I'm just not available for that. Can we do this at a different time? Have some of those statements ready. Even write them down in your phone if you have to, so that you can look at them, right? But have some things and have some ways to say no gently ready. Because again, half the battle is in the delivery. And if you can deliver it in a kind and compassionate way, the odds are the other person is going to react in the same way. Not always. And I think that's another thing. Another technique is just be prepared that some people are going to be unhappy, and you're going to have to sit in the discomfort of those individuals being unhappy with you. And knowing that even though they're unhappy, you've done something really positive for yourself, right? So with all of that said, hopefully you have learned a lot today. You're feeling more empowered to say no. You're embracing your right to say no. And I think, of all the things I said, remembering that this has got to be a process, that it's got to be small steps. Each and every small step towards saying no more confidently is a step in the right direction, and it builds on it. Builds one on another, one on another, one on another. So just continue to take small steps in the right direction and reprogram and recondition the brain to realizing that no isn't a bad thing. No is something that celebrates you. Now, with that, if you have any questions, comments, if you have any concerns, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm always welcome to open and honest conversation here within the community, and I'm here to support you in any way that I can. But for today, that is all I've got for you, and I will absolutely see you next time. I hope you have a brilliant day. We'll see you soon.